So I watched Turning Red recently, the latest Pixar film. What took me so long to see this one? Well, I was actually avoiding it for a couple of reasons. Most notably, the trailer. I think that even people who like this movie will agree that the trailer is really, really bad. Personally, it showed me that everything I didn't like in a movie would be in this one, with a super in-your-face attitude. And it didn't really make any arguments of how a transformation into a red panda could actually carry a movie. It seemed like an incredibly light, simple premise. And the other reason that I didn't want to watch Turning Red at first was because if I did, I knew I'd have to talk about it. And if I knew I had anything other than super glowing praise for it, we were going to have another Turtles situation. So I watched the film, and I have something other than super glowing praise for it. And now I'm going to talk about it. With the chaos and the drama this movie has caused, it's really tempting to just go one way or the other. Praise it for being shocking and daring and tackling new ground. Or to go in the other direction and absolutely eviscerate the film. It's really cementing itself with the Ghostbusters effect. It's not a movie, it's a political argument. Like Thundercats Roar, High Guardian Spice, or Masters of the Universe Revelation before it. Or She-Ra, or I can keep going on. These arguments are largely annoying, and they shouldn't be engaged in on any side of the argument, whether you're a defender or a detractor. If you're a detractor, it elevates the status of the movie and gives it more importance than it really deserves. If you're a defender, you obscure the actual merits of the movie and turn it into a target, which actually does hurt the artists in the long run, and hurts the actual political headway of whatever movement you're arguing for even more. Oh, that's not even mentioning that you're playing pawns to billion-dollar corporations that have packaged your personal values and have sold them back to you. Turning Red is a mixed bag. Actually, I don't even know if that's the best way to describe it. It is the Pixar film that I am the most mixed on. There are Pixar films that I absolutely love, like Soul, WALL-E, or Ratatouille. There are Pixar films I don't like Cars 2. And then there are Pixar films I don't care about, like A Bug's Life or the first Cars. Turning Red is a film I'd probably like if it wasn't for some glaring problems that took me right out of the experience time and again. So Turning Red stars an Asian-Canadian girl named Miley, growing up in Toronto in 2002, where one night she learns that she becomes a giant red panda whenever she feels any particularly strong emotions. This is complicated by the fact that she has an overbearing mother, is going through middle school, and puberty. It's a fairly simple movie despite all the drama, and yet there's a ton to talk about. I'm going to start with what held me back from actually enjoying the movie, and that is May's mother, Meng. I'm gonna be dead straight with you. I hated this character so much that I thought I would have to stop watching the movie. Meng is a helicopter parent, the type who controls every little thing about their child's life and are super panicked that a slight deviation from their plan will harm their child. So they create this self-fulfilling prophecy, where they hurt their child so much more than the rest of the world could. Every time that Meng was on screen, I was angry. The two most infamous bits you've probably heard of, when she finds drawings of May's crush and drives her down to the store to show the boy in them what May did. And the other time is when she came down to school unprompted to try and give May menstrual pads without any self-awareness that she was doing it in front of her whole class. There's also a third moment that really struck me, and that's when May goes to Tyler's party, and Ming was so blind to any possible reasons that May might rebel, especially after the first two incidents, that she basically stops May from seeing her friends. Every time Ming was on screen, this was some of the most uncomfortable a Disney Pixar film has ever made me feel. And need I remind you that this is a film about puberty, in which the problem is solved with twerking. So, defenders will rush and say that this behavior is accurate, especially in Asian communities. And there's a kernel of truth to the kernel of truth here. Asian communities are definitely at least stereotypically strict in upbringing. So, pardon my ignorance. Is it realistic to take a child's drawing of a crush, drag her down to a convenience store, and confront the person in said drawing in a store full of people? Especially if you are under the delusion that these things actually happened, despite one of the drawings being the boy as a merman. Is it really realistic to try and directly give menstrual pads to someone and not leave them with a nurse at school? Ming's behavior is too over the top. Actually, no, it's not. That's actually the problem. The problem is that it's realistic. It's something that could feasibly happen if you were one of the worst, most brain-dead people on Earth. It's not like, say, Doofenshmirtz, who also had a hard upbringing. So hard that neither of his parents showed up for his actual birth. If you want to talk about realism, we need to talk about Encanto. This was a Disney film also about generational trauma, which seems to be the theme of the season. Mirabel's grandmother was guilty of pretty much the same things, being overly controlling, trying to keep her family in the perfect boxes that she imagined for them. Of course, Encanto didn't make me want to smash my computer because it was subtle. You could constantly understand the reasons that Alma was doing the things that she was doing, even if you didn't agree with them. And in the end, you want to see Alma get better, not have her taken away in the back of a police car. This is like trying to redeem Doofenshmirtz's parents and doing it in a realistic way, and have it all heartfelt at the end. This is not a combination that works. Ming doesn't come across as understandably or realistically strict at any point in the movie. She comes across as psychotic, Luckily for the film, anytime that Meng isn't on screen, the movie gets a lot better. I wouldn't call it one of Pixar's best, still, but it would have been a tier above something like Onward, which felt a lot like wasted potential. Part of the Meng problem actually comes from the movie's style. It is a very much in-your-face, and takes a lot of cues from anime, with even mundane things being shot as over the top as possible, which is a baffling choice if you're making something that's supposed to tell some kind of down-to-earth lesson. This movie really feels like it was made for the TikTok generation. I mean, it was, obviously, it was released in 2022, but the movie also takes place in 2002, and that creates many problems with the film. Like, I hear some of the slang in this film, like the word besties, and while that term did apparently exist way back when, you would not be hearing that in middle school. The movie also overestimates how common cell phone use was among middle schoolers at the time. It wasn't until the mid to late 2000s when cell phones became a common thing in middle schools. Like, unless the family was rich, even the adults at the time would be using beepers. The anime style also feels off due to the time period. While anime did exist in the West, obviously, besides Sailor Moon or Dragon Ball, Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh!, it was pretty niche until like 2005. Then we started getting tricklings of things like Zatch Bell, One Piece, and so on. I mean, anime definitely was there, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't the styling of the time. Speaking of which, by 2002, boy bands were on the way out. That is literally the year that Justin Timberlake went solo, effectively ending the craze for a decade. 2002 wasn't a very in-your-face time either. It was quiet. It was grungy. Linkin Park was one of the biggest bands in the world. Everyone was emotional and full of angst. Like, there's one guy in the school who has this emo look, and yeah, that is 2002, right there. The whole movie should look like that. And that's partially because there's an elephant in the room that you do have to realize if you want to say, golly geez, let's set this film in 2002 for no reason. This film takes place less than a year after the September 11th terrorist attacks. I bring this up because it radically altered the culture of the time, in ways that make this movie feel exceptionally ignorant of the time. Even though, literally, the only reason I can comprehend that this movie is set explicitly in 2002 is because the director grew up in that exact year. Yes, this film takes place in Canada, not the United States, but all over the Western world. Canada, America, the UK, much of Europe. People were paranoid because 9/11 wasn't the only terror attack that had happened. It was the major theme of the decade. I mean, I can understand not wanting everyone to be so fearful, as that goes against the tone that the movie is trying to establish. But then you have very awkward moments if you actually were there and you do actually remember the time period. Like, the moment with Meng, this strange adult standing outside the school with a box. An adult that no one wants to account for, completely trying to obscure her appearance and getting attention of the kids in the school. In real world 2002, she wouldn't just be confronted by the school security guard, she would be tackled by the police and hauled in. Like, here's the thing. If they picked 1999 or 2000 or literally any year that was not 2002, this movie's setting would make a lot more sense. 1999, I could buy the in-your-face attitude, the boy band stuff. That was an optimistic year, despite everything else going on at the time. And on top of that, the movie doesn't get anything at all by setting itself in 2002. The boy band Four Town could have been replaced with any other musical act. The lack of cell phones and surveillance technology doesn't matter because May was caught on the news, and being hidden really isn't a goal in this film. I mean, I wouldn't set it in 2022, obviously, but taking place in just a vague, unspecified time, like any other Disney Pixar film, would have done this one so much favor. Take away Meng, and you take away the setting, and what's left with the film? You have a nice little story about a girl having something supernatural happening to her and going through it with her friends. And that is a nice part of the film. It's amazing, really. What the trailers made look like was going to be the worst part of the film was actually, in the end, probably its saving grace. May and her friends have very good chemistry. I just wish the film could be only about that, and it took more cues from something like Stand By Me. Because every time that it's not about that, the film struggles, and it struggles hard. Like, there's also May's father, Jin. He says like 2 words throughout the entire film, and then towards the end he decides that he wants to be an actual character, out of nowhere. The film is clunky. That's the best way to describe it. Which side of okay it's on depends on my mood, but it is vastly below Pixar's average. Or, well, it would have been 15 years ago. Oh yeah, there's also the puberty thing. It is really underplayed and the controversy is blown mega out of proportion. Beyond the metaphor of May turning into a red panda, you're not going to get much besides menstrual pads. Like, you could watch this film and think that the only symptom of going through puberty for May is turning into a giant red panda. And this is something that I'm getting really tired of happening, by the way. I don't know whether to call it shock advertisement or an offshoot of rainbow capitalism, where Disney and its stands say that everyone has to go see X, Y, and Z film and absolutely love it because it's so daring, so brave. You know, like how they add in a literal gay wink and a nudge, so they can claim that they have the first LGBT character in their film for the 20th time, in such a small role that they can remove it for international audiences. You want animation that's daring? Watch Braceface. No, I'm not kidding. That show actually had a period episode with things like menstrual cramps mentioned, which aired in 2001. That was more than 20 years ago. And if you're not keeping score, that happened before this movie even took place. Cartoons were more daring and diverse back then than you probably give them credit for, and definitely more than the industry does today. Not so much with films, but actual on-television animation, yes. It was probably more diverse back then than it is now, even. You want to talk Asian characters animation? American Dragon Jake Long, Life and Time of Juniper Lee, Jackie Chan Adventures, Yume from Code Lyoko, Hi Hi Puffy Amiyumi, and that is also ignoring shows that try to showcase many or all ethnicities, like Class of 3000 or Hey Arnold. I'm not going to give easy credit for things that have already been done and done better 20 years ago. Or more, in the case of Hey Arnold. But if you want to keep giving credit to a mega corporation that stole your values and is trying to sell them back to you, keep on praising every little scrap of things that they will keep removing for an international market. Because the only color that Disney and these other corporations care about is green.